Hi everybody, I'm going to record for you some helps for Workshop 3 midterm. So go ahead and let's get started. Okay, this is Indiana Wesleyan University, Math 108, Workshop 3. Okay, let's look at this first problem here. In order of operations, we're going to simplify this. Order of operations, remember, is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So we're going to go over here. And we're going to first of all look for anything with parentheses. Nothing has parentheses, so then we're going to go ahead and look for exponents. Exponents is next. So exponents, this one has an exponent. This one has an exponent. So that's the first thing we're going to simplify. I'm going to write out 100 minus 75 divided by 25 times 6 minus 8. All right, so I've done parentheses, exponents, multiplication I'm going to look for. So here's a multiplication problem here. So I would have, and that's it as far as multiplication. Multiplication division is interchangeable. You could do one or the other, really, but we're just going to go ahead and do either one, doesn't matter. But really, I'm going to go ahead and do, the reason I'm going to choose the division first, doesn't matter. But the reason I'm choosing it first is because if I multiply 25 times 6, that's going to be about 150, and then 75 divided by it is a little bit harder math. We could do it, but it just makes it a little bit easier to do 75 divided by 25 first. So I'm going to do that first. So 100 minus 3 times 6 minus 8. Because if I do this here, multiplication, division, I can do those interchangeable. So now I have another multiplication. So I have 100 minus 18 minus 8. And then addition and subtraction are interchangeable also, as long as I keep the sign. So this is a positive, that's a negative, that's a negative. And I'm just going to go left to right. So if I do 100 minus 18 minus 8, the answer is then 74. Okay? All right, let's go to the next one, number 2. Again, now for here, whenever we have anything on the outside, the exponent, it is going to refer to every single one on the inside. Notice that I'm even putting it on the number. The number has no exponent. If there's no exponent, you can assume that's a 1. So there's a 1 here also. And so it goes to every single one of these. Now, the great thing is, though, that it's a 0 out there. And anything to the 0 power is 1. And let me show you why that is really quickly. Because if I have, let's say, x to the n power over x to the n power, we know anything over itself is equal to 1, right? But using our subtraction property, that's the same as x to the n minus n, which is x to the 0. So anything to the 0 power is just the same as 1, because this is equal to 1. So that's why that works that way. Okay, number 3. Factor out the expression completely or state that the polynomial is prime. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a greatest common factor. And I look at here and I see, oh, look, 5 will factor out. So I'm going to factor 5 out first. So let's move over here and go 5. And I have x squared minus 1x minus 12. Okay, so now I'm going to look for 2 factors that multiply to get 12, that add or subtract to get negative 1. And I see if I have x minus 4, x plus 3, that definitely satisfies that, because 3 times 4 is 12, and negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. I'm going to show you the AC method, though, because that may not be obvious for you, and that might kind of be confusing. So let me show you the AC method really quickly. All right, you can actually start with this here if you'd like. It does make it a little easier if you go ahead and take a GCF out and start with this one, because then your numbers aren't quite as big. So let's go ahead and start with this one. And I have 1x squared minus 1x minus 12. And this here is my A. This here is my B, and this here is my C, just like when we've been doing ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. All right, so that's A, B, C. The AC method comes when you multiply A times C. So I have A times C, and then I just put my B over here. So A times C, 1 times negative 12 is negative 12. And my B is just my B, which is negative 1. So I am looking for 2 numbers that multiply to get negative 12, that add, or obviously subtract, to get negative 1. So I can try all my different factors. So I could have 1 times 12 Negative 1 times 12, well, that works. But negative 1 plus 12 definitely does not equal negative 1, so that doesn't work. I can go to 2 times 6. Well, negative 2 times 6 gets me negative 12, but definitely negative 2 plus 6 does not get me negative 1. Negative 3 times 4 gets me 12, but negative 3 plus 4, now that's close, that gives me positive 1. So really simply, all I have to do is switch this to 3 and negative 4, because that's now going to be 3 plus negative 4. And that there is going to be my answer. Now what you do with this is you take your two factors, 3 and negative 4, you bring down your a, 1x, 1x, and then you put in your factors, 3 and negative 4. Now if you can factor anything out of here, you do, and you have that quote-unquote cancel out because I've put the a in twice. But if you notice, this here is also my answer. Now, of course, remember, I took a 5 out originally, so I have to make sure I place my 5 back in. But that's my answer, and that's called the AC method. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, number 4. To multiply these things, when I multiply them straight across. But really what they're trying to do is they're trying to have you just factor and cancel. So I have this as x minus 6. 6x plus 42, let's go ahead and take out a 6 here, and I have x plus 7. 5x plus 35, I take a 5 out of here, and I'm left with x plus 7. 6x minus 36, I'm going to take a 6 out here, and I'm left with x minus 6. So now I'm just looking for similar factors since I multiply these on top and divide what's on bottom. So if the same thing that's on the top and bottom, those will cancel. Same thing with x plus 7, and all I'm left with now is a 6 on top, 5 and a 6 here. Well, these divide out also. Everything came out of the top, so I'm left with a 1. A 1 is a placeholder, and so that's why my answer is 1/5. Now, it not only asks you, notice at 1/5, it also asks you what x can't equal. Well, the answer is x can't equal 6 and negative 7. Why is that? Because when I factored here, notice I had x plus 7 on the bottom, on the denominator, and I had x minus 6 on the denominator. And my denominator, this is all my denominator, cannot equal 0. Because I cannot divide a number by 0. That's impossible to take something and divide it into 0 times. So I say, well, what causes my x to be 0? Or this whole thing. So x plus 7 can't be 0. Well, if x is negative 7, then negative 7 plus 7 would be 0, and therefore that would make this whole thing 0. Similarly, if x was 6, 6 minus 6 would be 0, so x minus 6 could not be 0. If I solve that, that's where I get 6 from. So I got 6 and I solved it, and that's where I got negative 7. All right? Okay, next problem. Okay, for adding these, all you have to do for adding, you have to just make sure you have the same denominator. Just remember, like when I have a simple thing, like if I have 1/2 plus 2 halves, I have the same denominator. How many halves do I have? That's just 3 halves, right? Same concept. Now we got to use letters. So here, these are the same denominator, so no big deal. All I do is just add all these guys on top. So x squared plus x squared is just going to be 2x squared. Negative 4x and positive x is going to be negative 3x. And I'm just going to leave this down here, x squared plus 8x. And then that's it. Now, I can simplify it because I can go ahead down here and I can simplify it and say, oh look, an x comes out of there and I'm left with 2x minus 3. And an x comes out of here and I'm left with x plus 8. Keep it on the landscape even. So then what's going to happen is these are going to cancel. And you only can cancel. You cannot cancel anything here because there's a plus sign or a minus sign connected. You only can cancel if there's a multiplication sign or parentheses, which means multiplication. So that's why these can cancel because of order of operations, back with order of operations. And this would be my answer. Now, what can x not equal? Well, look what we had on the bottom again. We have an x, and an x plus 8 was in the denominator. So what makes these two things 0? Well, if I put a negative 8 in there, negative 8 plus the 8 would make that 0. And if I put a 0 in here, that would make that 0 and cause the denominator to be 0. So that's why this here is the answer. Okay. Next problem. Solve and check the following linear equation. It wants to know what the solution is. And so all I have to do is just solve it. That's what I'm going to do. So it's kind of looks, and so I'm going to just multiply this in here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my work down here. 4 equals 4x minus 16. And then don't forget to distribute this negative into here, both of them. Negative x plus 5. All right, so now I'm just going to bring my 4x and my negative x together to 3x. Let's take the 16 on the other side, subtract the 5 on the other side, so add 16, subtract 5. And so that's going to be 15 equals 3x when I'm all said and done, because that's going to be 0, that's going to be 0. And this here is just divided by 3, and I get x equals 5. And that's my solution. Okay, next one, number 7. Perform the indicated operations. So the indicated operations, this is just asking me to subtract here, and it just wants me to kind of simplify as best as I can. So I'm going to take this negative 4 over the 60 minus square root of negative 50 over the 60. Well, I can simplify this the way I've learned how to simplify, and I know that divide this by 4, and I get 1, divide this by 4, or negative 1, I get 15. So this one's done really easily. This is the one that it wants you to do. Okay, so whenever there's a negative under there, I know I have an I. So I know that right away I have this as an I and then a 50. So I just took the negative out is what I did on the first step, because remember, I is equal to negative 1. So I just took that I out of there. Okay, now let's go ahead and simplify this. If I take a 50, and let's go ahead, that's going to be 2 times 25, that's prime, and that's 5 times 5. I find that this is the easiest way to simplify, because then that helps me see what I'm going to take out. So essentially, I'm going to say 50 is equal to 2 times 5 times 5. Now, 5 times 5 is 25, and the square root of 25 is 5. So essentially what I'm doing, I'm going to take one of these out. Since that's 25 and the square root is 5, and I'm left with a 2. So I'm taking a match out and taking just one of them out, because remember, it's a square root. So let's bring this back up to what we have. And I have now negative I 5 square root of 2, is all multiplied, over 60. Now I'm going to just cancel those, and I'm going to get 5 divided by 5 is 1, 60 divided by 5 is 12. So let's put this all together. It's kind of messy all over the place, but we have, here's the answer now. Okay. All right, next one. Use factoring to solve the quadratic equation. Check by substitution, use of graphing, and identify x-intercepts. Okay, so check by substitution or graphing utility. All right, for this one here, I'm just going to take x out of here, and I'm going to be left with 5x plus 2. Oh, I'm sorry, plus 10 equals 0. All right, so I have x equals 0. I'm setting both of them equal to 0, and 5x plus 10 equals 0. If I solve, I get x equals 0, and I get 5x equals negative 10, x equals negative 2. All right, so those are my two. It says solve using a graphing utility. So if I used my graphing calculator, you guys can, there is a free graphing calculator that you can use online. If you use a TI-84, there's a TI-84 app that you can get on your iPhone or any other device, Android device, and it's a free app. Or you can just type in graphing calculator, and you can do that as well. And you just type in this to your calculator, and this is what would get you. You would get here and here, and it would look like something like this. And when it asks you for your solution, what it's asking is where is it crossing the x-axis, and it's crossing the x-axis at negative 2 and 0. So that's what it's asking for. If it was asking to check by substitution, if I checked by substitution, I would just put 0 back in there. 5, 0 squared plus 10 times 0 equals 0. Obviously that works. 5, negative 2 squared, I'm trying the x equals negative 2 plus 10 times negative 2 equals 0. So this would be 5 times 4 plus negative 20